Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. Many of us won't be here to greet her, but on a quiet day, if you listen very carefully, you can almost hear her breathing. Have you ever missed something that was right in front of your eyes? Maybe you're like me and you've torn your bedroom and your living room apart looking for your keys, only to find that they were on the nightstand, where you leave them every single night. Or maybe, like me, you're a bit embarrassed to admit that you've lost something literally right in front of your face. You've feared the worst, convinced your glasses are lost forever, only to have someone point out that they are indeed resting on your head, right above your eyes. Sometimes we miss things that are trivial, moving on without a grand epiphany or an aha moment. Sometimes we miss something much more meaningful, a realization that stops us in our tracks. I had one such moment on a crisp fall day in Palestine over 5 years ago. As I walked through the winding streets of Bethlehem on my way home from Jerusalem, I became entranced by the art bursting forth from the separation barrier. Something I had only ever seen as disgusting, beyond redemption, suddenly became a place of promise, a visible sign of resistance. On this particular day, I saw for the first time the quote I started my speech with by Arundhati Roy. As I stood in silence, moving from one piece of resistance graffiti to the next, I wondered how often I had rushed past the wall, oblivious to what was before me, lost in the bustle of the city. When I think about the moments in my life that have culminated in me being here in this space with all of you, I think about the separation barrier in Palestine. I think about the visible way in which hope etched itself onto the very symbol of brokenness and oppression. I think of the determination of people, Israelis and Palestinians, who despite the weight of a military occupation and decades of violent conflict, commit themselves to the work of peace, to a vision of the world in which all may know and feel true liberation and freedom. And I think about the reaction of a former mentor, a longtime advocate for justice in her native El Salvador, who, after hearing I would be spending a year in Palestine, looked me straight in the eye and told me that as a U.S. citizen, my real work would begin when I returned home. I admit to being slightly underwhelmed by this response. Sure, I knew I wouldn't go to Palestine and single-handedly solve the conflict. I was aware that my privilege afforded me the luxury of spending a year of service, one that had a very clear beginning and end date. But still, as a somewhat idealistic, soon-to-be college graduate, I was hoping for a bit more validation, maybe even enthusiasm. But her words stay with me, because even though I missed the meaning initially, my friend's counsel constitutes a significant part of what has brought me to be at FCNL. Just as my friend promised, my work began in earnest when I returned home. And though there have been some ups and downs and some temporary distractions, I'm here today because I know that the privilege I have as a U.S. citizen compels me to work for another world, a world in which all of God's people and creation have the chance to flourish, a world in which we pour more resources into healthcare, education, humanitarian assistance, economic development, and peace than we do to fund wars that fail to keep any of us safe or free. And at FCNL, I have found a place where I can use my privilege to work to effect change in U.S. policy toward the Middle East for the good. This is what my friend meant when she said, "My work would begin when I returned home." And this is what makes being at FCNL so meaningful. It is a place where I have already been able to hear the faint breathing of another world. I'm still learning what it means to be part of a Quaker community. Growing up in a suburb outside of New York City, I admit my earliest introduction to anything Quaker came through seeing the man in the funky hat on the Quaker Oats box in our pantry. I'm still learning how things work in DC, and how at times one step forward can mean 2 steps back. Looking at it another way, there is always the chance to help create a new world. Friends, another world is not only possible, she is on her way. You see, many of us won't be here to greet her, but on a quiet day, if you listen very carefully, you can hear her breathing. When the noise of our days and the news of more violence seems too much to bear, I hope we can be strengthened by that small but strong breath of the new world, a world in which all of us together will be free.